Hee-hoo, it's Friday, the part of the week where your little mushroom lady of the internet shows how she drew a silly little something. Today, we shall harken back to our roots. Granted, our roots were planted like not even 2 months ago, but it feels like it's been a while since I've done ye old redraw. Just in case this is your first video of mine that you're coming across, I've been redrawing characters that I created in my childhood. These drawings were made anywhere from 7 to 10 years ago, and I've been doing a lot of drawing and character design since then. So it's time for these near and dear characters of mine to get the revamp or redo that they deserve. So for this week's redraw, I picked Xena. This drawing came in somewhere near the second to last group of characters that I made for the map. I was maybe 13 or 14 when I drew her. And I mean, obviously fantasy creatures have been my thing for like ever, but for some reason in this page I really leaned into that. Xena is listed as a dryad, and there are 2 other dryads, both with bows and arrows, as well as the only mermaid character for some reason that I created during this particularly large era of world building. At first when I went in, I thought I was going to lean harder into the dryad aspect and make her more of a tree person, like giving her bark for skin, but then I began drawing Xena and I don't know, it's like something about the red hair and the green clothing, it really just took a hold of me, and I made another druid, and you can tell she's a druid because I gave her a staff. Now, before I take credit for starting another good video off nearly right off the bat with an epic pose, I had almost completed a completely different drawing for my campaign book series, and this was probably my 3rd try at Xena. In terms of recording, it took me roughly 6 hours from sketch to final. Granted, there was a lot of dead space in the recording where I was looking up inspiration and references, but there were also a couple of times towards the end where I forgot to restart the recording, which is also a tragedy, but kind of makes up for it, you know? When I started drawing, I wondered why the idea of a druid wearing green and with red hair is very popular in druid designs. I was wondering if it was just because redheads and green looks great, or if it actually has any weight. Maybe you already knew this, but I didn't, and it's kind of a cool fact. Turns out druidic practices originate in Wales and are featured in a lot of Irish medieval history. Druids being the priest/teacher/judge figure in early Celtic societies. Factoring in that like 10% of the world's redheads are from Ireland and likely an even larger percentage in the entire general Celtic region, it is relatively unsurprising that we find redhead druids to be a pretty popular look. Of course, dryads are part of Greek mythologies, and neither of these druid or dryad facts have any significant bearing on my design decisions for Xena. Putting together Xena's outfit, the wooden corset with the mushrooms and moss was something I knew I wanted early on in the drawing, but after that I actually paused the recording for a really long time because I didn't have a clear path in mind. I wanted to keep all her clothing within the 3 categories. 1, discarded by nature for use, like the wooden corset. 2, wood or a magical item that was ritually carved or sung into existence, like the wooden bracer she has. Or if it was an item discarded by other humanoids, that is, like something that was collected or recycled, like the big swath of cloth that's resting on either sides of her hips. And I put a little net bag on her hip as well for collecting scraps and stones as she takes her walks through the forest. And of course, I gave her big beautiful hair because if you look at my last 3 videos, I either made my character not have hair, covered most of the hair with a vignette, or was drawing buildings and not hair at all, and it's time to face the beast. I cluttered up the drawing with little knickknacks and ribbons and patterns and textures because, again, I wanted her outfit to look like it had been scavenged from random items that she had found and picked up on her adventures. Here's where I start blocking in the colors. Again, I didn't really have any preformed ideas about her color palette. I knew her hair would be reddish, her skin would have pink undertones, and I wanted to include the greens and browns that I seen in the original drawing, but I didn't want green and brown to be the whole drawing. That's when I realized that her cape, which was originally supposed to be sort of looking like a pile of leaves, carried a lot of the shapes that you see in the wings of a jewel beetle. Now I know the sizes of the sections sort of imply the existence of very long or very large beetles, but just pretend you didn't see that. I was over the moon with this particular design decision. It's 100% aligned with what I would have loved at that age when I designed Xena. I am very obsessed with many of Colleen Atwood's costume designs, and at some point wanted to work in costume and set design. I have always been particularly enraptured with a dress featured in Snow White and the Huntsman, a movie I've never seen. But Charlize Theron wears one of these dresses with beetle wings embroidered into it. The beetle wings have been featured in several other dresses designed to show wealth, extravagance, and power. For example, this dress from 1888, worn by Ellen Terry, who was playing Lady Macbeth for Macbeth, as well as the very controversial but undeniably extravagant 1903 peacock dress of Lady Curzon. For Xena, however, I don't think her personality and intentions aligns with wealth or extravagance necessarily. However, I do see her as someone who is very strong and powerful, very driven by the idea of making the most out of what you have, even if that's nothing, and appreciating the beautiful gifts that nature leaves for you. I hop back and forth between a lot of different sections when working, which if you've been watching my videos for the last 3 months, this is no surprise to you. I have sort of a gradual building up of color method, but I work exactly the same way when working in any other artistic medium. That is, work on what I feel most motivated to work on and also the least intimidated by. Because I had been avoiding drawing hair for so long, I actually felt weirdly motivated to work on Xena's. Ever since I released the video on wisteria where I said something like, fur is basically just a lot of short hair, right? And likened the drawing of the werewolf head to working on my friend Kravitika's original character that just has an incredible amount of hair, we've had this running gag going, and the gist of the joke is just, is this a werewolf? Which I think is amazing. So back to Xena. I don't really have a lot I remember from her story. She might have been kind of another filler character or just me wanting to create a new OC because, I mean, why not? That's so cool. But a couple of notes I made on the map about her is that she lived in or around a large bonsai tree with dark red leaves on an island that is separated from the large mainland. The island doesn't have a name listed, however, it has a lot of fantasy locations on it, like Mermaid's Cove, Centaur's Bridge, and River of the Myriad. Xena herself is an adept magic user, unsurprisingly, and was part of a group called the Scales. Now, this group was originally something completely different that I don't remember. I do recall that Scales, along with 5 other group names, carried over into another adventure that I had created during the rise in popularity of the Hunger Games and Divergent, and I'd been an avid reader of the 39 Clues series for a while before that. If I learned anything from those books, it was that people started out the adventure separated into groups, factions, or classes. So I did the only logical thing and made up groups for people to be separated into. Anyways, it didn't really go anywhere all that special. Now, I know I mentioned earlier that I had been working on campaign book progress, and never fear, I'm not abandoning that project. It's still underway. The drawing I had started earlier in the week, I just felt like I wasn't doing the NPC justice at all, that I was drawing for the sake of drawing. Don't get me wrong, I think the colors worked super well, she's super beautiful. I just think as a character she deserved just as much hype and attention that I gave Solanum in last Friday's video, and you all deserve content that's not just like filler episode and me just trying to make a video. Also, I'm in love with the moss and fungus growing on Xena's corset. It's giving Caduceus Clay from Crit Roll's campaign 2. Actually, I'm just now realizing that a lot of this drawing is giving Caduceus, but I love it. It's part of the reason why I chose to draw Xena this week. My usual color palettes, especially lately, have been not super vibrant, and drawing Xena, making her look strong, giving her a classic druid look, but also making her look colorful but kind of scrappy, and having all the little doodads and textures in her costume, it feels good. And sometimes you just have no idea what you want to draw, and you sit down, push through it, and you end up with some pretty cool stuff. Costume design, I wouldn't say is my strong suit by any means. I've only just been recently pushing myself to include more in drawings and give a little more attention to detail. And I didn't go to any sort of art school, so all this advice that I plan to give you could be horrible. But as someone who taught herself, I hope I can talk about some things that I think about while trying to get better at character and costume design, and that will help you develop some direction when it comes to character creation. Some of the advice that I'm going to give will probably be in the context of a digital art perspective, but it should be more or less applicable in other art mediums as well. First of all, don't be afraid to do multiple versions. Have a couple sketch layers with different looks, or draw out the clothing on a separate sheet of paper. Flip between layers or different hairstyles, scrap them, save them for later, it's all good. You don't have to be perfect the first time. Second, I always find it helpful if you have sort of an idea of your character's job or personality and what clothing would suit that occupation or lifestyle. In my Solanum drawing, last week's video, and this drawing, both of the characters highly value freedom of movement. In Xena's case, I brought that into play a couple ways, some more practical or stylized than others. For example, Xena's wooden corset doesn't extend past her waist. This is to allow her a little more range of motion in her core. The wooden bracer on her arm has a U-shaped cut into it to allow wrist flexibility, and her pants skirt situation is very open and flowy. If she started running, most of the fabric would trail behind her without hindering any motion. Mandrive, on the other hand, from my video that was made about a month ago, has a lot of flowy fabric in her design, a huge heavy gold headdress, and these golden sort of neck things that keep her head held high. This is because, as a powerful and respectable beautiful empress, she doesn't need to run or fight to get what she wants. Third is sort of a similar situation. Again, think about the personality and environment and what they would put on their body. This time in the context of what sort of clothes they would favor on a personal level. Solanum's entire color palette was black, red, gold, beige, and then the gray-green of her skin. Her head is completely shaved, and there are very few things on her overall design that are dangling or free-flowing, besides the sheer robe and the gold-chained earring. Xena, on the other hand, has got all the colors. Very bright, lots of layers of clothing, and also bits of clothing that doesn't look like it comes from a set. She has lots of little dangling things around her waist because she enjoys collecting things. She has a little wax-dipped candle on the end of her staff because she enjoys making things, and the growing mushroom and moss on her corset show how comfortable she is with nature. Fourth, figure out a way to balance your art and keep the focus where you want. Something I did to create balance in Xena's piece was putting the faded red mark on the beige fabric at the bottom of her design to mirror, but not outdo, the bright red-orange hair on her head. Also, the frequency of details and the tinier details are all localized around her face and torso. Like, the print on the cloth is big, and so are the items in her net bag at her hip, but closer to the face, the beetle wings on the shoulders are small, the detailed mushrooms and moss on her corset are there, and the little trinkets hanging from the staff are swinging slightly towards her face. You actually see this implemented a lot in the design of Genshin Impact characters. For example, Yelan, she has lots of big blocks of color on her legs, but as you get closer to her face, she has more patterns on her clothing. There's the fur that's framing her shoulders, there's dangly earrings and tassels on her necklace, and also she has an asymmetrical haircut that is nicely balanced with the asymmetrical cut of her dress in the opposite direction. Last tip, in the wise words of Drawfee, fix it in post and delete your art. Tying things in with the first tip, your stuff doesn't have to be perfect the first time. You can always do redraws of a character like I'm doing now, or even just scrap the character entirely. As hard as it can be to throw away a piece of work you work really hard on, I mean, take it from me, the lady who still has a fantasy world map and characters from like 10 years ago, it's sometimes better to just put the details on hold. Whether that's getting rid of it completely, waiting for 10 minutes while you work on a different section of your drawing, or waiting for 10 years while you put all your stuff in boxes and pull it out years later to reconnect with memories or to prove to your younger self that you really did learn and improve a lot while you were away. Whatever your character design challenge is, I hope these tips help give you more concrete questions to ask yourself when creating your next OC, or at the very least, I hope that these tips weren't annoying. Like I said, I've never gone to art school. I'm not a source for professional techniques or strategies by any means. This is just what goes through my silly little mushroom head when trying to figure out how I want to portray a character. For whatever reason you're here at my channel, whether it's because you enjoy my weird rambling train of thought, or because you want to watch my campaign book get built, or because someone is holding you hostage and forcing you to watch my content, for whatever reason you may be here, we're all on this art journey together, still learning, still growing, and still a lot more to go. But without further ado, here Xena is with the before and after. From a project that started as me being too frustrated to draw something serious for my campaign book, I'm super happy with how she turned out. I love all the bright colors and her stance and the little details and the beetle wing cape. Even if she's pretty different from the original Xena drawing, I'm certain that younger me would have been very proud of how she turned out. And as per usual, I'm so happy you chose to watch my video and support me in my silly little projects. I appreciate every like, every watch, every comment, and I plan to be here with a new video as many Fridays as I can. Hopefully someday maybe more than just Fridays, with other projects besides speed draws, maybe some video games with people, or perhaps someday streaming. But who knows? Not me.